Well, good morning and welcome to Fellowship Church. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our different campuses. Thank you so much for joining us today. And those of you who are watching online, hey, Grapevine, would you guys help me welcome all of our campuses? I also want to take just a second to say thank you so much to Pastor Ed and Lisa Young for the opportunity to get to share with everyone today. It really is an honor. For those of you that know me, my wife and I, we both grew up here at Fellowship Church, and I'm telling you, there is no other church like Fellowship Church, and there are no other pastors like Pastor Ed and Lisa Young. So thank you so much for that. Well, hey, as you guys know, we are just hours away from a big moment. So I thought, you know what, let's start this message by giving everybody a little bit of a warm-up, right? A little bit of practice. Now, I'm gonna need all of your help, even at the campuses, to start this message, okay? So you guys get ready, because the countdown begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! That's right, we are just hours away from a brand new year. And with a new year comes that phrase that we hear over and over and over again on January 1st. Many of you have said this phrase before. You know what phrase I'm talking about. New year, new me, right? New year, new me. How come we say that or think that phrase every single year, but it seems as if every year we're the same person we were the previous January 1st? Could it be that there's more to it than just new year, new me? Could it be that there's more to it than just new year, new me? About 2 years ago, my wife and I were about to celebrate our 1-year wedding anniversary. Now, this was in March, so we decided to go to Florida. Now, my wife came to me and said, hey, before we go, I'm gonna go and get a spray tan. I said, awesome, enjoy yourself, go and get a spray tan. All of a sudden, I hear screams of excitement come from our living room. I run in there, I'm saying, babe, what's going on? She's like, you'll never believe what just happened. I just booked my spray tan online, and they've got a deal going on, buy one, get one free. Now, some of the ladies, you know where this story's going. My wife said, hey, it would mean so much to me if you would get a spray tan with me for our anniversary. I said, no way, I'm not doing it. She said, please. I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna be off of work for about a week. No one's even gonna see it. So I was like, I'll do it if it'll make you happy. So we go to this spray tan salon. My wife walks in there, she gets her spray tan, comes out, looks beautiful as always. Then she comes up to me and she says, Josh, okay, you're gonna go into room 4, step into that big machine there and just let the machine do its job. I was like, okay, but maybe just like a shade darker. Maybe people won't even notice that I got this spray tan, right? She said, just go in there, let the machine do its job. Little did I know that my wife was about to prank me, because she goes up to the front desk of this spray tan salon. She says, hey, my husband's over in room 4 and he's changed his mind. He actually wants the darkest tan that you guys offer. The lady at the front desk started laughing a little bit. She said, man, with all due respect, we saw your husband when he came in. That's probably not gonna be the best look for him. She said, no, he's made up his mind. That's what he wants. So she said, okay. Now, I walked into this spray tan machine with certain expectations about what was about to take place. Let me tell you, when I walked out of that thing, my expectations were completely off, because I had a completely different outcome. I looked into the mirror, I was the same color as like a Cheeto. I was so orange, it was ridiculous. You see, I went in with certain expectations, but came out with a completely different outcome. There's a story in the Bible of a man who finds himself in a similar situation. No, he didn't get this phenomenal spray tan, but he did find himself going into a situation with certain expectations, and he comes out with a completely different outcome. For those of you that brought your Bibles, open up to the book of Acts, chapter 9. Now, some of you are familiar with this story, but for those of you that are not, hey, I'm gonna give you a little bit of the context to set up the story and what's taking place. There's this man, and his name is Saul. Now, Saul was very famous at the time. but he was famous for the worst of reasons. He was famous for the negative labels about him. You see, Saul was labeled as a Christian killer. Everybody knew that Saul was murdering Christians because of their belief in Jesus. He was having them thrown into prison left and right. And where the story's about to pick up, Saul just got permission to go to this place called Damascus to have all of the believers, all of the Christians there thrown into prison. We're gonna begin reading in verse 3. It says, as he, who is he, is talking about Saul, as Saul neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up and go into the city, and and you will be told what you must do. For those of you that know the story, you know that Saul is about to do a 180 in his life. Saul, the same guy who is persecuting followers of Jesus, turns the opposite direction and begins to passionately pursue and follow Jesus himself. He begins to teach the good news of Jesus. You see, true change only takes place with an encounter with Jesus. Let me say it again. True change only takes place with an encounter with Jesus. You see, Jesus, he came from heaven to earth to live a perfect life, a holy life, so that way he could die on a cross to take the punishment for your sins and for mine. He rose again 3 days later, conquering and defeating death. Why? So that way he could remove labels. Maybe you've never heard it said like that before, but you see, Jesus, he came from heaven to earth to remove labels. I love the way that John chapter 10, verse 10 puts it. It says, and this is Jesus speaking, he says, the thief. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the devil. He says, the devil comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But he says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. You see, Jesus is able to change your label. Let me say that again. Jesus is able to change your label. You see, through an encounter with Jesus, you can remove that label of death that is on your life, and you can replace it with a label of life to the full. You see, whether we're aware of it or not, we are all walking around life with labels attached to us. You know, we live in a world and a culture where we are obsessed with labels. We're constantly thinking about labels. What label is that? What's the label that you're wearing, right? We're constantly thinking about labels. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you thought about your spiritual labels? The labels that are covering you each and every day, because we're all wearing them. Some of these labels are positive, right? Maybe somebody has labeled you as generous, or maybe someone's labeled you as loving. On the other hand, some of these labels that we're wearing each and every day are negative labels, like mistake, failure, addict, dirty, selfish, timid, jealous, just average, arrogant, unqualified. I could go on, and eventually I'm gonna say something that is gonna identify with you. You're gonna say, yeah, at some point in time, I've thought about that. Somebody's attached that negative label to me in my life. Just a few days ago, I was driving home from our Christmas experience, which was absolutely phenomenal here at Fellowship Church. And as I was driving home, I pulled into our garage. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I knew there was something wrong. I started to smell something burning. I'm like, what is going on? So I started to look around in the garage. What is this that is burning? I walked into our apartment and I said, Emily, there's something burning in the garage. She was like, I was just in there. I didn't smell anything. And so I was like, well, maybe I'm just smelling things. And about an hour goes by. My wife and I decide to go to dinner. So we go back down into the garage. We decide to take my wife's car. We load up our daughter in the car. I open up the garage. I hit the car in reverse. And as soon as I went to back up, I knew that there was something that wasn't right. I looked down and my wife's emergency brake was on. Some of the fellas, you're tracking with me right now. I knew exactly what just took place. I looked at my wife and I said, Emily, please tell me that you have not been driving around all day with your emergency brake on. She looked over at me and said, I knew the car was driving a little funny today. What? You see, that day I realized that you actually can drive around with the emergency brake on. You actually can drive around with the e-brake on. You see, but if you do that, you're going against what the manufacturer had intended for it to be driven. You see, just like you can drive with the e-brake on, you can still be a Christian with negative labels on. You see, many of you, you've given your lives to Jesus, but you're driving your life in a way that the me and you facture, the God of the universe, the creator, did not intend for us to live our lives. Because you're driving your life with these negative labels attached to you that Jesus never intended for you to wear. And we're sitting there wondering, man, why? Why is my life not firing on all cylinders? You see, labels affect the way that we think, and ultimately, our thoughts affect our actions. It's as if, we're living our life wearing a Velcro jacket, right? We're walking around life with a Velcro jacket, and any and every negative label that somebody throws our way, we're just allowing to stick to us. And here's the sad truth. Many of us, we've got 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50, 70 years worth of negative labels that are attached to us. And it's because of these negative labels that have been stuck to us that we now feel stuck ourselves. You see, we all have an amazing potential and purpose that God has given each and every one of us. But many of us have not fulfilled that purpose and that potential. Why? Because we believe the negative labels that other people have put on us. We believe that and we begin to allow it to keep us from living out this purpose that God has for our lives. So here's the thing, this new year in 2018, if you really want to experience true change, if you really want to begin to fulfill the purpose that God has for your life, we've got to have a mindset change. You see, we've been living our lives with this mindset of, hey, new year, new me, but it's not working. Here's the change right here. We've got to go by new year, new labels. New year, new labels. Because as long as you are wearing around those negative labels that you've always worn, you'll continue to think the same. And ultimately, you will continue to act the same, and you'll continue to get the same results that you've always gotten. So here's the big question. The question is how? How do we do this? How do we remove these negative labels from our lives? You see, it all starts with a relationship with Jesus. You will never experience the true change until you completely give yourself to Jesus. But giving your life to Jesus is really not the finish line. Oftentimes people think, I've given my life to Jesus, I've made it, I've arrived. No. Giving your life to Jesus is just the beginning. It's you just getting out of the starting blocks. Because now you have the opportunity to begin to passionately pursue that purpose that God has given to you. I have the opportunity on a daily basis, being a pastor, to meet with different people, and they come from all stages and walks of life, right? People who know Christ, people who don't know Christ. But one of the biggest misconceptions of Christianity that I see is people believe that once you give your life to Jesus, that it's all just gonna be smooth sailing. It's just gonna be easy from here on out. But the truth of the matter is, oftentimes, it can be tough. Because the moment that you give your life to Jesus, he's going to begin to challenge you, to stretch you, to grow you, to go places that you never thought possible. Back to the story of our boy Saul. He had just given his life to Jesus. He did a 180. Now he's passionately pursuing the purpose that God has given him. And all of a sudden, Jesus says something about Saul. It's found in Acts chapter 9, verse 16. This is Jesus speaking. He says, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. What I find so interesting about that is this man that was just persecuting Christians, Jesus didn't say that about him. He didn't say, hey, that guy that's persecuting all of these believers, man, I'm gonna make him suffer. No, he said it after the fact that he started to follow Jesus. He said, I'm gonna show Saul how much he's going to suffer for my name. About 3.5 years ago, I was in one of our table classes. If you're not familiar with the table class, it's a class that's open and available for everybody. We're gonna be starting them again in January 14th to be exact, at all of our different campuses after each and every service, where you can come and show up and learn more about Fellowship Church and how you can get plugged in and connected and involved right here. Well, I was at this table class and I met this man named Lewis. After the class wrapped up, I started to have this conversation with Lewis, and he started to share his story. And instantly, I realized that, man, his life was broken. Man, he was in a dark, dark place. He started to tell me about how his marriage was just hanging on by a thread. His wife wanted nothing to do with him. He had just started coming to our church a few weeks prior, and she wanted nothing to do with our church either. Lewis started to tell me about how he was battling this addiction with drugs that he had been battling for just about his entire life. He was in a really dark place. Well, I prayed with Lewis and I said, Lewis, man, you've got to get consistent. Show up each and every weekend right here at Fellowship Church and just watch and see what God can do. You've tried everything else, try this. I saw him every single weekend. He sat right about there in the center of our worship area. And each and every weekend, he was taking notes. Well, one of these weekends, Pastor Ed preached a phenomenal message where he shared the gospel. And Lewis discovered that he could have a relationship with Jesus. And that day, he gave his life to Jesus. It was after that he gave his life to Jesus that he started to remove all of these negative labels that had defined him his entire life. There was a change that was happening, and his wife started to take notice of this change. There was something different about Lewis. She said, you know what? I'm gonna try this thing. I'm gonna go and check out Fellowship Church. So she came and sat with him. She also gave her life to Jesus, and they got baptized that weekend together. This same marriage that was hanging on by a thread is now thriving. I was talking to Lewis last week and he told me they just celebrated 25 years of marriage. Absolutely phenomenal. This April, coming up this April, Lewis will now be clean from drugs and alcohol for 4 years. And he's been going to our support and recovery groups right here at Fellowship Church. You know, but here's the interesting thing. If you ever get the chance to talk to Lewis, what he'll tell you is that their journey has not been easy. Since the moment that they gave their lives to Jesus, it hasn't been an easy road. You see, just shortly after that, Lewis's wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. Right after that diagnosis, Lewis had a stroke and lost some of his vision. But here's the amazing thing. Each and every week they remained faithful. They were obedient. They showed up every single weekend with a smile on their face, and they served others. They got plugged in. They got involved in a married connect group, and God started to do some amazing things in their life. God was faithful to them as well. And the amazing thing is that Lewis's wife is now completely cancer-free. Absolutely incredible what God is doing in their life. You know, even though Lewis went through this difficult situation, he's still fulfilling the purpose that God has for him here on earth by sharing his story with so many others who are experiencing difficulties that like similar to what he went through. You can find Lewis every weekend here at our Grapevine campus, literally filling up rows of people from the support and recovery groups as he invites them here to experience the same power of Jesus that he experienced. You see, following Jesus is not always easy, but it's always worth it because it's the best and the blessed life possible. You know, when you talk to Lewis, he'll tell you, there are definitely times where, man, he's reminded of his past. He'll tell you there are times that there are people that will remind him of those negative labels that he experienced that once defined him before. And let me tell you, if that's you today, that's gonna happen. You're gonna experience that. Saul experienced the same thing. Saul just did this 180 in his life. I'm gonna begin to start following Jesus. Well, Saul ends up having his name changed from Saul to Paul. Paul started to teach the good news of Jesus. Well, you gotta believe there were some haters out there. Some haters who would say, you know what? No, I'm not calling Saul by the new name Paul. I'm gonna continue to call him Saul because I want to remind him of his past. I wanna remind him of his past mistakes. But you see, what Paul understood then is what we've gotta understand today. You see, we are not what people call us, we are what we answer to. I wanna set some students free today because you've been defining yourself, receiving these negative labels based off of what people have called you, but you are not what people call you, you are what you answer to. You are what you answer to. In 2018, in this new year, there are going to be people who are going to continue to call you by the same negative labels that have defined you, even after you remove those negative labels from your life. They're gonna continue to call you that. But here's the thing, you don't have to answer to those negative labels. You can answer to the things that God has labeled you. So here's the question, what has God labeled me? If you'll pick up your Bible and begin to read it from cover to cover, you'll realize there are so many verses in here where God has labeled you. He has told you exactly who you are. He's told you about the future that he has for you. Pick it up and read Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, where he says, hey, I've got a hope and a future for you. Romans chapter 8, he says, you are a child of God. He says that I am for you. He says, you are more than a conqueror. John chapter 3, verse 16, he says that you are loved. Psalms 139, he says, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You see, these aren't just verses that we put on t-shirts and coffee mugs. These are verses that we've got to live in our lives. We've got to live these out. I had to live one of them out this morning. Oftentimes, when I get up to speak, I start to get this negative label that will try to attach itself to me. Josh, you're unqualified. Are you kidding me? You're gonna get up there and speak? You're unqualified. But I have to remind myself, I don't answer to that label. I answer to what God has labeled me. And he has told me that you can do all things through Christ. And that's what I answer to. You see, Lewis, just last week I was talking to Lewis. I said, Lewis, man, I would love to share some of your story from stage. Wanted to get permission. He said, man, go for it. As I started to talk to him, I was like, what's going on? What's been new in your life? He started to share another story with me. Lewis and his wife, they heard about this family that was new at our church. They had to move to Dallas-Fort Worth because their child was ill. And there was a hospital here that was gonna be able to take care of them. So they literally had to get up and leave everything behind. They moved to Dallas-Fort Worth and they were living in an apartment with no furniture, no beds, no sofas, a TV, nothing. So Lewis and his Connect group, they heard about this. They said, hey, let's all pitch in. So they pitched in some money and they were able to buy them brand new furniture, some sofas and some beds. They got them a TV. So Lewis goes and rents a U-Haul truck, loads all of it up He gets the address to go and deliver this furniture to this family in need. As he pulls up to this apartment complex to deliver this furniture, he's instantly reminded, a flashback to almost 4 years to the day he was in that same apartment complex doing drugs. That day, he almost lost his life. He was rushed to the ER where his lungs collapsed. The doctors told him that it was a miracle that he even lived. You see, that day, Lewis, he went by the negative labels that always defined him. He was living his life based off of addict, a user, a low life, no future. But that day when he pulled up in that U-Haul truck, after he experienced Jesus in his life, he didn't answer to those anymore. He answered to the labels that God has called him: a blessing, a giver, a provider. That same power that changed and transformed Lewis's life, changed and transformed Paul's life, is the same power that is available to us today. I don't know what you came into this experience with today. We've all come in here with different labels. We've all come in here with different expectations. My prayer for you today is that you would have a completely different outcome this year. Let's pray. God, I believe that today there are people here who need to remove that label of death over their life and replace it with the label that you've given them and provided for them, a label of life to the full. If that's you, you know who you are. I'm gonna say a prayer right now. You can repeat this prayer. You just say it in your heart. God knows your heart. Just say, God, I admit to you that I'm a sinner. I admit to you that I've made mistakes. God, I've tried everything else. God, but in this moment, I want to ask you to forgive me of my sins. I want to ask you to come into my life and make me new. To the best of my ability, I want to live the rest of my life for you, passionately pursuing this purpose that you have for me. God, for everybody else in this room that's already made that decision prior to today, I pray that today would be the day that we realize we've got to change our mindset from new year, new me to new year, new labels. That 2018 would be the year that we live with the labels that you have given us. God, we thank you in advance for all of the blessings that you're gonna give each and every one of us in 2018. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.